They thought I shattered. They thought I'd beg.
They thought I'd show up one night, mascara running, pride in my pocket, whispering that I couldn't live without him. They were wrong. He told everyone I'd be back. Said I'd realize my mistake. Said no one else would want someone like me. But I didn't return, not even to say goodbye. I stopped checking his socials. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped bleeding for applause that never came. The day I walked away, I didn't just leave him. I left the version of me that needed his permission to exist. My name is Alyssa Monroe, I'm 29 years old, and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. And this is the story of how I disappeared, so I could finally come home to myself. When I was little, people used to say I was meant for something big. I had this spark. My teacher said it, my mother said it, even my high school counselor pulled me aside once and told me to never shrink. And for a while I believed them. I had dreams. Not the kind you scribble in journals, but the kind you feel in your bones. I was going to be a clinical psychologist. I wanted to understand people, especially the ones no one else could. I wanted to build something meaningful, offer safety where the world offered storms. In college, I was on fire. Full scholarship to Chapel Hill, part-time research assistant at a trauma clinic, volunteering on weekends with youth outreach. I was driven, ambitious, alive. That's who I was when I met Ethan Carter, the man who would unravel me, thread by thread, while smiling the entire time. We met at a mutual friend's engagement party. He was charming, too charming. The kind of man who knew just how to tilt his head when he asked a question, who said your name like it was a secret between you two. He asked me to dance even though the floor was empty. He laughed at all the right times. He didn't seem real. And maybe that should have been my first clue. We started dating not long after. At first, it felt like magic. He showed up with flowers on Thursdays because he said Mondays and Fridays get all the love. He remembered little things, like how I took my coffee, what song made me cry, the exact moment in a movie that made me cover my eyes. He studied me like I was a thesis. And I mistook that for love. The cracks came slowly, like hairline fractures in glass. It started with little comments. Do you really need to be working on weekends? Don't you think you're spreading yourself too thin? Why are you always so tired when we hang out?
I thought he was worried about me. I thought he wanted me to slow down because he cared.
But then he started keeping score. I canceled my poker night for you. You couldn't even skip one outreach session. I drove 45 minutes to see you. The least you can do is wear something nice. Eventually, I was always the one compromising. Always the one apologizing. I dropped one of my volunteer commitments to make more time for him. Then another. Then I declined a summer research fellowship in Boston because he said, long distance ruins everything. And somehow I believed him. I started changing. Slowly. Subtly. I stopped speaking up in class. I began wearing more muted colors. Ethan didn't like red lipstick or short sleeves. He said it attracted the wrong kind of attention. I went from being the first one in the lab to the one who always needed an extension. I started avoiding the library, stopped hanging out with my cohort, and eventually, I just floated. One day, my mentor Dr. Kessler pulled me aside after a seminar. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me. You were on track to publish this year. Now you haven't submitted a single proposal. I gave her the same answer I gave everyone else. I'm just figuring things out. But inside, I was disappearing. My friends stopped calling. My parents grew silent. My mom would text things like, just checking in. And if I didn't respond, she'd wait days before trying again. No one wanted to confront it outright. Maybe they thought I'd snap out of it. Maybe they didn't want to lose me entirely. So they waited while I faded. Ethan, meanwhile, had grown bolder. His criticisms were no longer subtle. You used to be interesting. Now all you do is mope. I can't carry this relationship by myself, Alyssa. You should be grateful I haven't walked away already. I started believing him. I thought I was a burden. I thought he was the only one who stayed when I stopped being useful. The final straw wasn't a fight. It wasn't dramatic. It was a Tuesday night. I'd come home from a part-time shift at a bookstore, one of the few jobs I could manage while spiraling. I was exhausted. My feet hurt. My eyes burned from lack of sleep. I found him on the couch, scrolling on his phone. No hello. No kiss. He looked at me and said, flatly, "You didn't get almond milk. You know I can't stand regular." I didn't respond. He sighed, tossed his phone on the cushion, and muttered, "You're lucky I put up with this." That was it. That was the moment. It wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was silence. It was a cold, clean break in the dam. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just walked into our bedroom, grabbed my backpack, stuffed in what I could, took my car keys, and left. I slept in my car that night outside of a 24-hour gym. My phone buzzed 4 times. All from him. "Where are you?" "Don't be dramatic. You'll come crawling back. You always do. This is why no one takes you seriously." I turned my phone off. No one knew I left. No one knew I was gone. That's the thing about disappearing. It's easy when you already feel invisible. The first morning after I left Ethan, I woke up in the back seat of my car, curled up under a wrinkled coat, with my neck aching and my heart hollow. The windows were fogged from my breath. My stomach growled, and my mouth tasted like defeat. But there was something else there too. Something subtle. Something I hadn't felt in years. Silence. No commentary. No judgment. No one analyzing the slope of my shoulders or the sound of my sighs. Just the hum of early morning traffic and a sliver of sun spilling through the windshield. I didn't have a plan. I had no savings, no apartment, no job lined up. All I had was a broken phone charger, 2 changes of clothes, and a Barnes & Noble gift card from my birthday that I hadn't used yet. I didn't cry. I just drove. I ended up parked behind a strip mall, eating a stale protein bar I found in my glove compartment. And for some reason, I pulled out a notebook from my bag, the same one I used in college for field notes, and I wrote, "Day 1. Still breathing." That notebook became my ritual, my one constant. Every morning, I'd write something, anything, just to prove to myself I was still here. Eventually, I got a part-time gig at a senior center. It wasn't glamorous. I helped with tech support, resetting iPads, updating phones, teaching retirees how to use email and video calls. The pay was barely enough for gas and instant noodles. But they needed me, and I needed to be needed without being drained. The director, Miss Charlene, was a retired nurse with a sharp tongue and a soft heart. She hired me after I fixed her phone's Bluetooth connection and made her laugh in the same breath. "You got magic fingers and a soul that's limping," she said. "You'll fit right in." At first, I just went through the motions. I showed them how to swipe, tap, log in, over and over again. Some didn't remember from one week to the next. Some forgot me entirely. But I kept coming. Then one day, something shifted. There was this woman, Mrs. Geraldine Moore, 81 years old, fiercely independent, wore brooches shaped like animals. She always called me that little tech girl and insisted that machines were from the devil. One afternoon, she came in with an old Kindle Fire her son had mailed her for her birthday. "This machine hates me," she muttered, slamming it on the table. Just like my Herald. I smiled and gently picked it up. "Let's see if I can make it behave." I showed her how to open her email. She squinted at the screen. "I haven't talked to my son in 8 months, she whispered. Said he was tired of calling and me not picking up. I nodded. "Want to try a video call?" She hesitated. Then she nodded. It took a few tries, but eventually the screen lit up, and a man's face appeared, balding, bearded, tears already welling in his eyes. "Ma?" Geraldine's lip trembled. "You brought my baby into my living room," she whispered. She didn't say much after that. Just held the Kindle like it was made of glass, her eyes locked on the face she hadn't seen in nearly a year. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Day 49. It didn't make headlines, but it mattered." Moments like that became my anchor. There was Eugene, a retired jazz musician who only trusted paper. I taught him how to upload his trumpet solos to YouTube. There was Maria, a grandmother from Honduras who cried when she finally saw her niece's graduation video. There was Terry, a grumpy ex-mailman who refused to call me anything but college girl, but gave me a lemon pie from his wife every Thursday like clockwork. They didn't care who I used to be. They didn't ask why I had no resume worth bragging about. They only cared that I showed up. And in showing up for them, I slowly started showing up for myself. I began sleeping better, eating better, breathing better. I found a studio apartment over a laundromat. It smelled like detergent and burnt toast, but it was mine. I thrifted furniture, painted the walls a soft teal. I stuck post-it notes to the bathroom mirror that said things like, "You are allowed to start over. You left. That's bravery. You are not what he said." I started writing again, this time for myself. Tiny blog posts on healing, on survival, on the art of coming home to yourself. I didn't advertise them, just posted quietly. I titled the blog Soft Return, a nod to the courage of re-entry, to building from inside out. One post went semi-viral. It was called What I Would Have Said If I Wasn't Afraid. It was raw, not angry, just honest. It resonated. Comments started flooding in. I thought I was alone. Thank you. This saved me tonight. I left today. Because of you. It overwhelmed me. Not with pressure. With purpose. I wasn't saving lives. I wasn't winning awards. But I was giving people language for their pain. And in doing so, I was finally giving language to mine. I stopped waiting for Ethan's name to pop up on my phone. I stopped checking to see if he viewed my Instagram stories. I stopped needing to prove I was better off. Because I wasn't trying to be better. I was just trying to be whole. Every week at the senior center, someone called me the tech angel. Every week, a new person cried after a call, or an email, or a photo they finally got to see. I held their hands. I listened to their stories. And in between their memories, I found mine again. The girl who loved helping. The girl who stayed up late, researching trauma therapy. The girl who wanted to build something that made people feel safe. She wasn't gone. Just buried. And now? She was digging herself out, one lesson, one story, one silent victory at a time. Over the next 2 years, everything I'd quietly built began to bloom, organically, without permission, without applause. What started as a few blog posts turned into a small community, then a movement. Soft Return wasn't just a blog anymore. It became a digital sanctuary for people, especially women, who had walked away from toxic relationships, cult-like workplaces, suffocating families, and were trying to remember who they were before they shrank to fit someone else's story. I added resource pages, self-guided healing journals, even beginner tech tutorials for women over 40 who were starting over. I called it Gentle Tech. At first, only a handful of downloads. But then came the messages. I used your guide to start my Etsy shop. I read your blog after my divorce and made my first website. My teenage daughter follows your journaling prompts. Thank you for making healing less scary. By the end of year 2, we had 18,000 newsletter subscribers, an average 74% email open rate, 1,200 monthly enrollments in the free Tech for Beginners digital course, mentions in 2 online magazines, small ones, but still something. Miss Charlene at the senior center beamed when she heard the numbers. She called me her little digital minister. You preaching healing through screens, baby, she said one Tuesday while pouring sweet tea into mismatched mugs. But outside that bubble of warmth, something colder waited. My past. My family had remained distant during the early years. They didn't understand what I was doing. To them, I'd thrown away a promising psychology career and traded it for what? Teaching old people to use email? One Thanksgiving, I visited home for the first time since leaving Ethan. It was awkward, sterile, like sitting in a room with polite strangers. So, my cousin Danielle said across the dinner table, I heard you're doing something with the internet now. I nodded. Yeah. I run a support and digital education platform for women rebuilding their lives. My uncle chuckled. Rebuilding from what? My mom said nothing, just dabbed her lips with a napkin and changed the subject. Later that evening, in the kitchen, I overheard my brother, Mason, talking to his wife. She always finds a way to make herself the victim. She didn't want the pressure of real work, so she built her own playground. I walked back to my car in silence, drove 2 hours home without turning on the radio. That night, I wrote, Day 711. Success isn't always loud, but neither is silence. I wish I could say those comments didn't sting, but they did. Because when you survive alone, a part of you still hopes someone notices. When I was featured on a podcast, one that had over 300K listeners, I sent the link to my mom.
She didn't respond.
Not with a thumbs up, not with a proud of you, not even with a got it. When I was invited to speak on a virtual panel for women in tech and recovery, my sister didn't log in. She texted me a week later. Sorry I missed your webinar thing. Things have been crazy with the kids. And when I finally launched my own digital course, Soft Reset, 30 Days to Rebuild Your Digital Identity, I got more love from women in Denmark and Kenya than I ever got from my own family group chat. My favorite passive insult came from an aunt during a family Zoom. At least she's doing something creative. Alyssa was always the artsy one. They didn't get it. They didn't want to get it. To them, I was still the girl who dropped out of grad school, who walked away from a good man, who made things difficult for herself. They didn't see the community I'd built, the lives I'd helped repair, the inboxes full of thank yous, the women who wrote, "Your words were my lighthouse." They saw a girl who couldn't stick to the plan. And so I stopped explaining. I leaned deeper into my work, into the purpose that didn't need applause, into the community that didn't ask for credentials before saying thank you. One day, a friend of mine, Trina, a former nurse who left an abusive marriage and now ran a mobile art studio, said to me over chai, "You ever notice how healing makes you louder to strangers and quieter to your past?" I laughed. Every single day. Because while my family remained blind, the world kept opening. Women I'd never met invited me to collaborate. A wellness brand reached out about sponsoring my next guide. I was guest blogging for trauma-informed therapists, and the newsletter now reached inboxes in 31 countries. I wasn't building an empire. I was building shelter. Not for my ego, but for the girl I used to be. For the ones still in their cars, trying to breathe through the fog on the windshield. Still, part of me wondered, had Ethan seen any of it? Did he know that the woman he said would come crawling back was now helping thousands rise? I never searched for his name. I never typed it into any bar. But I'd be lying if I said I never wondered what he'd say if he saw what I'd become. Not out of bitterness. Not even for closure. Just out of curiosity. Because even as I soared, the silence of those who once doubted me echoed louder than applause. And yet, I stayed soft. I stayed kind. I stayed focused. Because now I knew something I didn't back then. Being unseen by the wrong people is not a reflection of your worth. It's a blessing in disguise. The first true breath of freedom didn't come with a plane ticket or a lease. It came one morning when I poured my coffee and didn't feel my chest tighten from anxiety. The sun peeked through the kitchen blinds, and for the first time in months, it didn't feel like a mockery. I was finally starting to feel like me again. One evening, I sat at the tiny dining table in my apartment, bills scattered around me, stress building. I was juggling freelance gigs, copywriting, photography, even online tutoring, but it still wasn't enough. Then, something inside whispered, "You've always given your best work to everyone else. What would happen if you bet on yourself?" That question haunted me for days. Then I did something wild. I applied to a local small business grant. I pitched an idea I'd quietly nurtured for years, a digital marketing studio focused on helping women-owned brands grow online. I named it Luminary Lens. And I swore to myself that if they said no, I'd still do it anyway. The night before the results came in, I sat in bed whispering affirmations, palms sweaty, heart racing. I wasn't praying for a yes. I was praying for courage to not give up if it was a no. But the universe met me halfway. I got the grant. It wasn't much, $5,000, but to me it felt like $1 million. That grant wasn't just money. It was validation. It was the world saying, "You matter. Your ideas matter." I didn't tell anyone back home. Not even Camille. I needed it to grow in silence, without the weight of other people's expectations. Weeks passed. My first client came from a local yoga studio. Then another, an independent author. Then a wedding photographer. Suddenly, I wasn't just surviving. I was building. One evening, while sipping wine and scrolling through Instagram, I stumbled across Ryan's profile. Yes, the same Ryan who told me I'd be back. His smug face stared back through a vacation selfie, captioned, "Living my best life, while some people still figure it out." And I laughed.
Not bitterly.
Not sarcastically. I just laughed. Because I had finally figured it out, and he was no longer part of the equation. What once crushed me now empowered me. His words used to live rent-free in my head, but now they bounced off me like raindrops on armor. That night, I posted something on my own page for the first time in months. She remembered who she was, and the game changed. No hashtags. No location. No need to prove anything. Just the quiet, powerful truth of someone who had finally come home to herself. It was at Camille's engagement party that our worlds collided again. I hadn't planned on going. I almost didn't. But Camille begged me, said it wouldn't be the same without her best friend there, and that Ryan might be stopping by. That last part nearly made me decline, but something inside told me, go anyway. You're not who you used to be. So I put on a simple but elegant navy blue jumpsuit, the kind that said I know who I am, without trying too hard. I curled my hair just lightly, wore my favorite gold hoops, and walked into the venue with my chin held high. The moment I stepped in, I saw familiar faces and then his. Ryan stood by the bar, drink in hand, still wearing the same smug grin that once made me shrink inside myself. He noticed me immediately. His eyes widened, just for a second, but then he masked it with that familiar arrogance. He walked over like he had every right to. Well, look who finally came crawling back, he said, voice laced with fake amusement. Took you long enough. I didn't flinch. Back? I asked, lifting an eyebrow. I'm not back. I'm just passing through. He blinked, confused. I've seen your posts, he said, shifting. Your little marketing project or whatever. Business, I corrected. It's called Luminary Lens. We just crossed 6 figures last quarter. His face twitched, barely. You always had a thing for fantasy. I smiled, calm and unfazed. And you always had a thing for underestimating me. Silence. The music played in the background, people clinked glasses, but our conversation became its own still universe. He tried to recover, laugh it off, but his charm had lost its power. The person I used to be, the one who sought his approval, was long gone. Ryan, I said softly but firmly. You told me I'd come crawling back, that I couldn't make it without you. But I did. I built something that matters. I healed. And not once did I ever look back wishing I'd stayed. His mouth opened slightly, but he had no response. And the truth is, I continued, stepping a little closer, you did me a favor. When you let me go, you gave me a chance to find the version of myself you were too afraid of. I turned to walk away, but then paused. One more thing, I added, glancing over my shoulder. Next time you assume someone will come crawling back, make sure they haven't already learned how to fly. And with that, I walked away. I joined Camille by the dessert table, smiling like the past hadn't just tried to rattle its chains behind me. She gave me a look, one of pride, one that said you did it, and handed me a macaron like it was a trophy. That night, I danced like nothing had ever broken me. Because, truthfully, nothing had. Not really. 6 months after that night, I found myself on a stage in downtown Chicago, holding a mic and looking out over a packed auditorium. The Luminary Lens Women's Summit had sold out in 3 hours. Over 500 women from all over the country, coaches, creators, entrepreneurs, survivors, were seated in that room, waiting to hear from me.
Me.
Just a year ago, I was crying on my bedroom floor, doubting if I had what it took to start over. Now, I was mentoring others through their own rebirths. I had gone from being someone's afterthought to being someone's inspiration. My keynote was titled, Turning Rejection into Resurrection. And every single word came from a place of truth. I told them about the pain, the manipulation, the subtle comments that chipped away at my confidence. But I also told them about the late nights building my brand, about watching YouTube tutorials until 3 a.m., about taking freelance clients for $20 just to prove to myself that I could do something on my own. I spoke about the first time I hit $10,000 in a single month, about the moment I registered my business officially and framed the paperwork on my bedroom wall, about the strangers who became clients, the clients who became supporters, and the supporters who became family. I told them I didn't just get over Ryan, I outgrew him. And I didn't mean it spitefully. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything to him. I was just standing in my truth, and that truth had become too expansive to fit into the tiny, dim space I used to shrink myself into for his comfort. After the speech, a line formed. Women came up to hug me, to cry, to say thank you, like I had given them something back they didn't even know they'd lost. And in a way, I had. Because when you reclaim yourself, you give others permission to do the same. One woman, probably in her 40s, grabbed my hand and said, I left my husband last year. I didn't think I'd survive it. But now I feel alive again. Hearing you today, it felt like God was confirming I'm on the right path. I teared up because I remembered. I remembered the girl who didn't know her own worth. And I realized she's not just gone.
She evolved.
That night, I went home to my sunlit loft apartment, the one with the big windows, the plants in every corner, and a record player that spun Nina Simone as I danced barefoot with a glass of Merlot in my hand. I wasn't lonely. I was full. My circle was smaller, but deeper. I had Camille, a tight sisterhood of fellow creatives, and a support system that was built on respect, not codependency. I had clients who trusted my voice. I had a bank account that no longer cried for help. And most of all, I had peace. I didn't check Ryan's Instagram anymore. I didn't wonder if he was happy, or regretful, or still trying to date women half his emotional age. He wasn't part of my story anymore. Because glow-ups aren't just about aesthetics. They're about alignment. They're about remembering who you are and refusing to forget it ever again. And that was my true triumph. It was a Sunday afternoon, almost a year to the day since I had left Ryan. I had just wrapped up a private coaching session and was sipping a green smoothie on the patio of my favorite cafe in Wicker Park. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at it for a second. Something in my gut told me exactly who it was. I let it ring. Then it stopped. A few minutes later, a message came through.
Hey.
It's Ryan. I saw your name in a Forbes article.
Congrats.
You always were meant for big things. Would love to catch up sometime. I actually laughed out loud. Not in a cruel way. Just in that full body, you've got to be kidding me kind of way. He didn't know about the nights I cried in my car. Or how I went to therapy every Tuesday for 9 months. Or how I had to reteach myself how to believe in love. Not romantic love, but self-love. He saw my success, but he didn't see the soil I had to dig through to bloom. And now that I was shining, now he remembered what I was worth. I didn't block him. I didn't even respond. Because silence is sometimes the loudest answer. A week later, I ran into his mother, of all people, at a bookstore downtown.
She gasped when she saw me.
Said I looked radiant. Told me she was sorry for everything, and that Ryan hadn't been the same since I left. Apparently, he was single, restless,
still jumping from job to job,
still blaming the world for his stumbles. I smiled politely, thanked her, and walked away. As I stepped outside, the spring sun kissed my face, and I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. That was the closure I didn't know I needed, because I realized then I never needed revenge, or validation, or even an apology. I just needed to keep walking. Forward, away from him, into the life I created, into the woman I had become. And the view from here? Unmatched. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes the greatest revenge is no revenge at all. Just healing, rising, and not looking back. I used to think closure came from someone else, from them finally seeing your worth, or apologizing for the pain they caused. But the truth? Closure comes when you decide it's over. When you stop waiting to be understood and start choosing yourself. Ryan thought I'd come crawling back. He thought I'd stay broken. that I'd question my worth without his approval. But I didn't just prove him wrong, I proved myself right. You don't need anyone's permission to rise. You don't need to justify your glow-up. And you definitely don't owe anyone a seat at your table once you've built it from scratch. If you're reading this and you're in the middle of your own heartbreak, your own betrayal, your own quiet rebuilding, keep going. Don't look back to see if they're watching. Don't look back hoping they'll return. Just keep walking. Because what's ahead of you is far more powerful than anything you've left behind. You are not meant to crawl. You are meant to soar. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe they're stuck where I once was, waiting for validation, not realizing their power. And if you've ever walked away from someone who didn't see your worth, tell us in the comments. What did you discover about yourself after? Subscribe for more real-life stories that inspire strength, healing, and bold comebacks. Because remember, sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's the beginning of your greatest rise. Thank you for watching.